Welcome back to Philosophy of Gaming. My name is Marshall.
I'm Shawn.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about an interview that just happened this past week with Xbox CEO Phil Spencer. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that he said in relation to the Redfall release, the new game that just came out, to very, very poor reviews. One thing I want to say before we get into it, because I know we're going to have a lot of negative to kind of touch on. The big thing is I feel like it was pretty big of him and honest of him to come out and do the interview, answer the hard questions, and kind of just take the heat in a way. However, as you'll come to see, we don't think that they were necessarily as honest as we thought.
Yeah, so even though that he did address the hard questions, I don't think that his answers were in any way good answers. Does not look very well for him, does not look very well for Xbox. Marshall, can you tell us real quick before we get into this a little bit of what happened with the Redfall release?
So this game just came out this past week. A lot of glitches, a lot of bugs, a lot of, seeing an enemy that's running towards you, but they just look like they're floating. Instead of running at 60 FPS as promised, it's running at 30 FPS on consoles. And the biggest problem with all this is that they knew that it wasn't running right, and they still let the release happen, and they didn't delay it, and it's just disappointing.
Yeah, so basically the game came out and it wasn't ready. It wasn't operating the way that it was supposed to, and they got a lot of heat for that. And so Phil Spencer showed up on I believe it's called the Kind of Funny podcast. It's an Xbox podcast.
Focused. Yeah, it pre-planned too. This was already going to happen, and it just so happened that Redfall came out to poor reviews. I can't imagine he didn't already know that was gonna.
Yes.
Be the
So
case.
One of the panelists asked Phil Spencer pretty much about the release of the game. One of the things that was brought up was how do you factor in, when it's, say, appropriate to delay a game? And obviously, Phil Spencer, he gave a very long answer to the question. So obviously we're not going to transcript the whole thing for you, but one of the things that that he said that I thought was quite troubling, here's a quote. He said that, "I think it's maybe a little simplistic to say if you delay it 3 months, the core creative work would have delivered something different than what it was." Basically what he's saying is that it's simplistic to say that we should delay a game that's not ready, but he's blaming it on the creative side of it. So he's been talking about the creative vision as if that was the problem, right? So you have a game and it just wasn't well received by the community. That's something that happens a lot, and if that's all this was, we wouldn't be here talking about it. Problem was that Xbox released a half-baked game. We're used to seeing that sometimes from certain third-party developers. I know that's a frustration of being part of the Ark Survival Evolved community that I have to, unfortunately deal with. But you don't expect that from a first-party platform, say like Xbox itself.
Now,
right?
This was from Arcane, a studio that is under Xbox's, control and ownership.
Sure, and we can put a link in the description that actually shows the full interview, and he addresses Arcane and everything like that, right? So you can see for yourself what we're talking about. But I do want to address this point because the game did not come out ready. The game itself was half-baked, right? So my question, Phil, if you're saying, I think it's simplistic if you delay the game 3 months, well, how would you feel, say, if I was a restaurant owner and you came in and you ordered a chicken cordon bleu and I served it to you where the chicken was raw? And then you rightfully would come to me and complain and say, well, this chicken is raw. What are you doing serving me raw chicken? And then if I were to say, well, I think it's simplistic to just cook the chicken, like to delay bringing you your food, I'm going to just cook the chicken a little bit longer to make sure it's ready. That is a piss poor excuse for what happened here. The obvious answer is You don't release the game if it's not ready, because Xbox has a reputation. You're not talking about a third-party developer. You're talking about Xbox itself, who is in charge of releasing these games, and you have the CEO of your company basically saying, you know, oh, well, we just wanted to put the game out there. That's basically what he is saying, and I don't find that to be acceptable whatsoever, right?
I think that the chicken cordon bleu analogy is a bit far-fetched. I get your concept and your disappointment and anger, but if they brought it to you raw, you could get sick and potentially even die. Where this is not the same, but I get your point, and I won't discredit that. I think the big thing that hits home with me in that quote itself is, why not delay it? What do you mean if we delayed it 3 months, it wouldn't make a difference? That's essentially what he's saying. Well, it would. It should. I mean, the creative direction, in my opinion, was phenomenal and incredible, and it looked great. I think the team at Arcane probably knew 3, 4, 6, 8 months ago this game's not going to be done on time, and they probably asked for some sort of an extension, and maybe not Phil himself, but the team that oversees this said no, and now obviously Phil has to take the heat for it, and I think that's where I think Phil did a good job at taking the heat. But my point is, delay it. I mean, the game looks really, really good as long as it's working and it's half-baked, just like Shawn said. I mean, it is half-baked and it could be much better.
But a decision was still made by Xbox to still release the game.
And it shouldn't have been.
Nonetheless. And in the chicken example, it's obviously analogies aren't 100%, because then, well, we'd just be talking about chicken or Xbox, right? But you have there's going to be some differences, right? So if you eat raw chicken, you're probably going to die. If you play a game that's not half-baked, you're not going to die. But it still affects the reputation of the restaurant that serves you raw chicken, and that restaurant is going to go 100% under.
True.
And it's the same thing with this. And the problem is that this isn't the first time that this has happened. They did the exact same thing with Halo Infinite, and I know that they infamously delayed Halo Infinite, which is, you know, that pisses off the community, right?
But even worse, Halo Infinite was 343 Studios. This is a company that's been owned by Microsoft for 20 years.
But even if a game is delayed, that gamers can get over that. They're going to be upset, but what really kills you is if you actually release a game that's just not ready, because you're essentially sending the message to your customers that are sitting down in your restaurant that you are not worth a fully prepared product. That's the message that we're getting, and I think that is why this is unacceptable. Unfortunately for Phil, this isn't the only thing that he said that pissed off the Xbox community, and I'm gonna preface the next part by saying, I think that when it comes to gamers, we are a very, very tough crowd to please. I go on a lot of YouTube videos where there's reviews, or say, like, for example, in the art community, when something that comes down the pipeline from a developer, people get really mad really quickly. I am always the kind of person that has a lot of grace for the developers, because I understand there's a lot that goes into making a game, but yet you still manage to piss me off. So the next thing I want to talk about, and this is the part that really actually makes me question the future of Xbox, because he was asked a question towards the end of the interview about the consoles, right? So the question was somewhere along the lines of, you know, Xbox has been doing all of these work on, you know, PC and, you know, the cloud-based gaming. Is consoles going to get the attention and the kind of love that the console players have been, you know, looking for? And the answers that he gave to this were not very satisfying at all. So here's a couple of quotes. They came throughout different parts of his answer, but the words that he used was that we want our Xbox console community to feel awesome. The console is the core of the Xbox brand. And he also said that we want our console players to feel like first-class citizens. But, and this is one of those situations where when you say the word but, it pretty much negates everything else that was said beforehand, right? So here's some of the other quotes that Phil Spencer said regarding the console side of Xbox. It's just not true that if we go off and build great games all of a sudden, you're going to see the console share shift in some dramatic way. Another one. We're not in the business of out-consoling Sony or out-consoling Nintendo. There isn't a great solution for us. And the other one that he said was, that's just not the world that we're in today. There is no world where Starfield is an 11 out of 10 and people will start selling their PS5s. That's just not going to happen. Not quoting specifically, but some of the other things basically that he was saying was that when it comes to consoles, Xbox is in third place behind Sony and Nintendo. And so therefore being competitive in the console space is not worth the time and attention for Xbox to pursue. And to me, that is just absolute loser talk.
It's also something where, like, for example, that last quote where, you know, there's no world where Starfield comes out an 11 out of 10 and people are going to go selling their PS5s. That's not the point. I'm not, Xbox is not my number one choice, but that just sounds like you're giving up. I mean, you don't need to say that. That's not the point. People don't need to go sell their PS5s to buy your console because of a game that comes out. The point is, make good games, have a good platform. People will continue to buy it. I just don't get how they say they're behind. I don't know, man. It's just weird because I've always viewed Xbox as the revolutionary. That they seem that they're ahead, but in a way, it's something you may touch on, but they just seem like an amalgamation of both of the other consoles and themselves and Steam at the same time. Like, we just want everyone to be able to play, and I love that, but stop releasing games before they're ready. I don't.
Yeah, and to that point about the selling the PS5 thing to buy an Xbox, that's also crap, because I remember I was a very consistent PlayStation, gamer, and it wasn't until around the PS4 and Xbox One phase that I actually bought my first Xbox. I bought the Xbox One X, and it's not like I sold my PS4 to do that.
Right.
I bought the Xbox, and I started investing all of my money into buying games and start building, say, the library for the Xbox. And so now, what are you saying? So that now it's the future for me to try to continue buying Xbox games to play on my console if I'm a console player, that it's not going to be worth it, because it almost sounds like you're just trying to kind of pull back from that whole console game. So I guess here's the problem, and I'm picking on Phil Spencer a lot, rightfully so. Phil Spencer is the CEO of a very major company of Xbox, which is owned by Microsoft. I get that his persona is to try to be somewhat relatable to like the gamer sort of a view. He wears his t-shirts underneath this hoodie. Personally, I don't really like that look. I think if you're a CEO, you should be dressed professionally and you should take yourself seriously. And I could step back and say that as a gamer, maybe that persona would work, but you're not taking yourself seriously right now. So what exactly do you have going for you right now? So you're retreating from the console game, which has been a huge part of Xbox. So that doesn't seem to be going for you right now. So now you want to focus on game development. Well, let's look at Redfall and Halo Infinite.
Or the other 20 studios you've bought over the last
So that's
5
not
years.
going well for you right now. You don't seem to be taking yourself very seriously. And so what's your plan? You're just going to try to acquire some massive company, say like Activision or Blizzard, which, by the way, that's not going well for you. So what do you actually have going for you that can give the players of Xbox hope and faith in your platform?
For context, the CMA, the UK regulatory group, just passed something preventing Microsoft from acquiring Activision Blizzard, which has been in the works for near a year at this point. It's likely they will appeal it, and I still think it's likely they will acquire, but it's just kind of, I don't know. It's kind of difficult to hear all of this, everything that you've been saying, everything that Phil said on the show. It's difficult to continue to be a fan of the platform. Like for me, I'm more of a fan of Sony and of Nintendo, but it doesn't mean I'm not a fan of Microsoft and what they're doing with Xbox. And I do like some of the things that they're doing. I think the biggest problem is forfeiting. And that's what this feels like. It feels like a forfeit. It feels like hey man, we didn't win the Xbox One round, so we were out that round.
Which is something he explicitly pretty much
said in this video.
Yeah.
But also, we're out this round too. And maybe we'll come back in the next one. We're not sure yet because we're really not sure where we're going. The only thing we care about is we want to have a unique experience and want to make good games. Well, where are the good games? Because the games are there, but they're not ready when they come out. And so I'm waiting a year for them to be ready. I mean, this is something you expect from a second party or third party publisher. Not from Microsoft themselves. Look at Sony exclusive games. Look at God of War, Last of Us, Horizon. I mean, look at Nintendo. You can't even make a list of Nintendo. Just look at Nintendo games. Every single Nintendo game launches and is ready to play with no issues. Granted, it's probably a little bit easier when it comes to Nintendo because of the close-knit group and the lower graphical quality and everything, but it just don't release them. Don't release them if they're not ready.
Yeah, so here's my problem. I am an Xbox fan, and for me this is quite disheartening because my faith in the future for Xbox seems to be at an all-time low just simply based off of what the CEO of Xbox has said. I have been a fan of Xbox for pretty much 3 primary reasons. One, not in no specific order. One, I like the controller. If I were to switch to PlayStation, I could probably get an Xbox style controller, some aftermarket product that works for that. So I don't technically need my loyalty to Xbox to say for that. The second thing is that Xbox seems to have been over promising a lot of really good exclusives and say, for me personally, Arc. But even all of those promises seem to be under-delivered right now, so that isn't a good sign. But then also Xbox, compared to the other big guys, is American-made. And to me, that's also worth mentioning. I think that the problem is that right now, I feel like, unfortunately, for the American side of things, we don't tend to hold ourselves to acceptable standards. I don't know if it's because of COVID and everybody's now working from home and so people aren't being quite as productive as they should be, because I feel like ever since that COVID stuff happened, it seems like game developers, there's just been a lot more delays and problems and just not so much artistic creativity or even be able to deliver on the technical side of things, like say for Redfall, for example. Those things aren't happening right now for Xbox. But Sony and Nintendo don't seem to be having that problem, and I can't help but think maybe that has something to do with that those companies are, say, Japanese owned, and I know it's a bit of a stereotype, but it seems like historically accurate that Japanese folks hold themselves to incredibly high standards when it comes to the work that they perform, and if they fail to meet those standards, they take on a tremendous amount of just like shame and dishonor, and I feel like that's a mindset that carries through the tech world and the technology that they produce, say at Sony and Nintendo. So they're out competing us because their standards are a lot higher. And you know what, when it comes to gaming, I don't know who's making them, what country it comes from, but if you're having that loser mentality, change the mentality. Stop thinking that Sony and Nintendo are gonna beat us just because they're doing better. I don't like this whole "woe is me" mentality.
Already beat us. That's really what came out of that interview. Is he said we already lost, so we'll keep trying, but we lost already. And it's just kind of like you don't do that. In the last 100 meters of that sprint, you run like your life depends on it because you want to win. You don't say, well, they already won, congratulations to them. Hey, props to them for being an honorable loser, but don't give up when you haven't lost. There's no loss in this industry. You just keep going. You keep going on and on and on. Don't say you lost. Stop losing. That's the answer. Don't release the game. You didn't have to release it. There's other big games coming out these last couple weeks. Tears of the Kingdom, Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom comes out this week. Granted, it's not an Xbox, but that came out, and what came out the week before? Another big game came out the week before. I can't even remember it right now because I'm just too heated about it. But there's big games coming out right now around Redfall. Why is Redfall coming out? If it's not ready, put a 3-month, 6-month wait on it again because it's already happened. Same thing as Starfield. It gotta wait. Don't put that game out half-baked. Put that game out done. I don't want to play it when it sucks. That's not what the gaming industry is looking for. That's a new mentality of putting out half-baked games. And only second and third party publishers are doing this. And I don't want them to. But hey, they might run out of money. You know who's not running out of money? Microsoft. So don't put out half-baked games. Finish them first. Finish them. Delay them. Finish them.
The last thing that I will say is that one of the things that Phil Spencer was talking about is that I can't cite it word for word, but he's basically saying something along the lines of the strategy for Xbox is for everybody to play all the games that they love anywhere. Something like that is what he said.
Yeah.
To me, that makes it seem like Xbox is trying to make a move, say, towards like a Steam sort of a strategy.
We already have a leader in that industry. Guess who it is?
Steam. I don't know why that's something that needs to happen. Xbox created the Game Pass. It was the first one to do something like that, and it was awesome. And so now Sony is doing something similar, but Xbox innovated that. Continue to run with it, and he talks about that he is. But the most alarm... Here's the thing. Coming up with a lame excuse for a bad release is one thing. But signaling that you're retreating from the competition when it comes to consoles, when here's the thing, Nintendo's kind of an outlier. It's its own little market. You have PlayStation and Xbox, who are the two giants. Without one, the other one is just going to dominate. So why are you even signaling that you want to back down from that battle?
Yeah. Go ahead and say a game from another console's good. That's not what we're here to discourage. It's just don't give up. It just makes no sense. So on June 11th, the Xbox showcase will happen. Phil said in the interview that he plans on trying to give more of an honest representation of what the games actually look like. This is something we've heard time and time again from different developers about showing what it actually looks like. But I do not think that we have heard this from one of the console developers. So, June 11th, we'll see what happens. We'll see if it's honest. We'll see if some of the things that Phil was saying in this interview actually hold true. See if...
Or maybe he just put his foot in his mouth. That's the best that we can hope for.
So, until then, well, probably before then, we'll talk to you.
See you next time.